Welcome back to another Tom Talks, guys. Today we've got a very special guest on the show. We've got Gary Lin. Gary, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm these days I'm obviously property investor. That's most people know me. Obviously through NZ Herald, I've been there a few times now, last couple of years. Yeah, my main line will be, my main income or whatnot will probably be investing. And then during the day, I just work in a bank, business lending. Learning about business lending towards the business side rather than the property side. And on the side as well, kind of my passion project, or what they call a side hustle. Some people call that. It's just teach people how to invest in property. The first home buyers or first time investors. Teach them how to avoid making mistakes and then buying the right property. Yeah, so that's what I do.
Fantastic. And what was it that initially sparked you to want to get into the property investing side of things?
Yeah, well, that's going back a decade or more now. At the time, I was kind of like fresh out of uni. I was a civil engineer for almost 12 years prior to banking and stuff like that and coaching. And at the time, really early on, I was playing World of Warcraft. Some of you might have seen my NZ Herald article on that. And then at the time, I was like, I was probably like 24 or something like that. I'm 37. At the time, I thought, hey, if I can play video games full time, that's before the day of Twitch and streaming and all that, right? You can actually make a living out of that now, but not back then. And I thought if I have got some passive income, even like just $500 a week, I could play games all day.
That's so true.
But obviously, never achieved that goal. I moved on past that now. Family and all that is more important. And then that's how I got into investing, really. 2010. And then the last couple of years, I've been able to build up a 14 property portfolio. These days it was like 12, 30 million now. Yeah.
That's
fantastic. Great.
That's an awesome story. Actually, it's a good inspiration for myself and all the young viewers out there. One thing I wanted to sort of ask about was the state of the New Zealand property market at the moment, and then sort of move into how you can get into investing. So at the moment, we've had COVID-19 come in about almost probably a year ago, really, and we've seen property prices go up. In terms of the property prices going up, why is it that housing at the moment for the average first home buyer is becoming so much more expensive?
Yeah, so we really have to step back a little bit and kind of almost do like a kind of summary of what happened in 2020. Obviously, 2020 in the beginning, March, etc., before Corona struck. The property market was quite buoyant, obviously, after the Labour elections, 2019 or not last year. Property prices were really going up, back in 2000, early on last year before COVID. And then COVID struck, and we saw that here we go, like GFC again. We overdue, really, every 10 years or so. That's one of the reasons I work in a bank as well. You want in a recession, you want to be have a steady income, and bank is probably one of the safest place.
Of course,
And then COVID struck, and then obviously people were in panic mode in March, April, May, etc. during the lockdown. Obviously I'm on the front line, seeing a lot of businesses coming for help through the bank. But the really interesting part is since June or July. Really, it's everything's just become more rosy, I guess, partially because Kiwis love to, I've been in New Zealand 24 years now. Kiwis love to travel, right? And so that's actually a lot of spending that Kiwis are not spending on in terms of like going to Australia, overseas travel, etc. People doing their OE. So people, but the thing is, people always need to spend. So what happens is that we still got the subconscious urge to spend, but it's just the way we're spending is different. So obviously we're spending on almost domestic travel. A lot of people buying cars, second-hand cars are going up in price, really strangely. And then obviously a lot of people are looking to buy their first homes or buy investment properties. First home buyers make up like 30-40% of the market now, which is huge. And obviously we're experiencing a boom. Later half of last year. So and at the same time, that's obviously one of the reasons is demand has shot up. driving up property prices, and that's going to continue in 2021, probably even next year as well. Because the border is not going to be open, right? With this, second wave UK virus. So I hope I don't offend UK people from UK. And then the second thing is obviously interest rates. Interest rates before March was like 3.39, 3.55%, and then now we're looking at 2.29%, as low as 2.29%.
Right, okay.
So percentage drop is like 40%.
Yep.
So for property investors like myself, my biggest expense is actually interest, right? Paying to the bank. And even though last year the rent hasn't really gone up, you can't increase the rent because of legislation as well. But the thing is, my costs have dropped 40%. My interest costs, right? So there's a lot of cash flow coming. So that low interest rate also urges a lot of investors to get into the market as well, get into the market. And then also at the same time, the third reason is that for the hot market is that the banks are starting to reduce the testing rates. What that means is you can borrow more because of the banks are seeing the interest rates have dropped a lot. So they've dropped the requirements a little bit as well. Not by the same margin, but looking at 10%. And 10% is big impact for the market. So basically 2021 is a continuation. The interest rates will continue to drop because funding rates are dropping. Countries are printing money left, right, and center. US have printed like some, don't quote me on this, but you can fact check online, as much as 30% of their total reserve currency. I mean, in 1 year, the United States have been around for 150 years or something like that. It's crazy. So there's so much money out there looking for real tangible assets. And so that's why with a low interest rate environment like this, and central banks are obviously supporting the economy by printing more money, giving more funds to the market. Share market is, ballistic. Same as property market as well. So and also probably banks will ease up on lending as banks will chase after the residential market because that's the safest form of lending. I just don't see much can really derail this boom, really.
Yes. Yep. Now, in terms of
so kind of long answer to your question.
No, it's good. It's good. No, I appreciate it. With the low interest rates, the positives of that, obviously, for investor is it's you've got just got low interest rates, so you can put less out for that down payment. What are some of the negative aspects of that? If like why won't interest rates go up? You said they're going to continuously go down. Why is that?
Yep. Well, that's kind of back to economics. Is that since the 1971, U.S. President Richard Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, right? And also in the 80s as well. Basically what that means is money is no longer tied to gold. So the countries have got unlimited power really to print as much as they can, as long as people believe in the money. The value of the money is now backed by the confidence of the people using it. And you can't really spend physical gold or what's called Bitcoin that easily, right? And then people will still back to the currency, right? The money they have, New Zealand dollar, US dollar, whatever. And then the money printing as well. The interest rate being so low is also part of the reason is the inflation. Because a lot of the OCR is definitely tied heavily to inflation figures, CPI, all that. But the problem with the inflation, how we measure it, is that before, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it was 1986 that the US moved away, basically excluding house prices in the way they measure inflation. So what happens is the double inflation, as high as 19% in the 70s, all of a sudden, because of that change, all of a sudden dropped to single figures, the inflation. So now we are seeing inflation around 1 to 2% range, but the thing is it does not include house prices, right? So it's not, depends how, you're pretending about economics and, whether it's, so basically the goalposts have changed essentially. And because of the inflation, official inflation figure is so low that there's no incentive to push up interest rates.
Sure.
And because of obviously this COVID ravaging economies all around the world, especially UK, US, etc. The second wave, whatnot. Then obviously it's not giving any confidence to the business sector, right? Probably in reverse. Actually, people are more pessimistic outside of New Zealand, especially. So definitely, central banks are not going to push up interest rates in this environment. You rather than be safe than sorry. So, like a lot of economists like Tony Alexander, etc., they're all predicting interest rates going to be staying low for longer. And also you got to remember too, interest rate these days are so low that a very small number increase actually results in quite a substantial increase percentage-wise. Like for example, before the GFC in 2008. OCR was like 8%, 8.5%. Floating rate was 10%. So when 2002, the interest rate was around 7%. So from 7% to 10%, 30% increase, right? I think, or 40%. Yeah, 3 divided by 7. Anyway, my math is terrible, so it's something like that, right? But so from so let's just say 2.39% to go up 40%, you're looking at about 3 point something, right? So it doesn't take a big increase as a percentage to big a percentage. And obviously, you got to think about if governments put up the interest rates, what that means is that businesses, homeowners, investors, whether it's commercial, residential, they all have to pay more. So when the increase gets to a certain point, then obviously a lot of businesses generally can't afford it, right? Businesses start to go under, etc. And that's actually going to eventually, when the interest rate is too high, it will have a flow-on effect, which is going to bankrupt some businesses. And obviously, economy will go with it, right? Go the other direction. And then they have to lower interest rates. So the cycle continues like that, right? So, but anyway, the long story short is that, interest rate is going to be, appears to be lower for longer.
And because they can't go up, because you just mentioned there the flow-on effect of like one business goes out because they can't pay their interest back on time, and a lot of people taking out money for houses, etc., would have to sell those houses because they can't pay it back on time. At some point, when is this sort of crazy boom going to stop? Because we've had it for a while now. The last major financial crash was back in 2008. And we've just picked up from COVID and gone again. At some point, does this thing have to end?
Well, you would think so, but the thing is, this is not a free economy, right? This is not a free economy. This economy is controlled by the central banks. Like for example, back in GFC, Lehman Brothers collapsed, I think September 2009. So before that, the central banks, Federal Reserve, of America, they started to drop the official cash rate. And so did we, right? But at that time was already too late. The economy was going down since 2007, especially the housing market. But then there's a lot of like other things like what do you call it? Collateral debt obligations and CDOs and all that, all tied in the mortgage. So I don't want to go into that. So the difference is that the central bank started printing money when the shit hits the fan, right? Back then, when Lehman Brothers collapsed. By that time was kind of too late, a little bit too late. We're already, almost falling off the cliff. But now, this time round, however, is that central bank was starting to print money well before COVID. If you look back, that was like probably 2009. It was starting to print money already. So the central banks obviously was expecting the economy to slow, right? And then they actually jumped the gun. They actually started printing money, supporting the market well before the cliff event. So that's really the difference. And ultimately, the central banks are in control of the economy, right? And then that's why they continue to print a lot of money, supporting the market. That's why everything is every market is going up in price, especially in the Western world. And really, the question is like, will it collapse? Well, really, you need to ask the Federal Reserve of America is that when are you going to stop printing money? Which I don't think they will, right? I don't think they will.
They can't.
So, but at the same time, Well, if they stop printing, obviously the what they call it, the party is over.
Yeah, exactly. It's gone. Yeah.
Because the free market obviously can't sustain itself. The
Yep.
free market is gonna fall, right? The only thing is controlling is the central bank. So if central banks stop printing money, the market is done.
Yeah.
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 Then unemployment rate goes up. People get upset. That we're already getting a lot of income inequality and all that stuff. A lot of people are rioting in the States and whatnot, around the world, France especially, which is not covered in mainstream media. And if the economy goes south, that's going to be even more protests and stuff like that. And then obviously, democracy is built on votes. People vote the other way, right? So it's in the politicians' best interest to keep the gravy train going.
Keep it nice and happy, sort of thing, eh? And yeah, that's a very good point. And I was wondering.
That's right. So basically, really, it's to anticipate if the market is going to collapse. Just look at what the central banks are doing.
Yep.
Really. The minute they stop printing money or slow down the printing money, then you expect something adverse happening in the market.
Yep.
Yeah. And then really, it's kind of unprecedented territory. I mean, the amount of market manipulation by the central banks.
Yes. Yeah. And do you think you could just explain to myself and everyone else listening the idea of a real estate bubble and how the bubble works, and then how it can pop and crash?
Well, the thing is because I also work in banking and lending, right? So I can tell you that there's no such thing as bubble.
Right. Okay.
In real estate, because the thing is, like, if you want to, for example, for anyone to want to borrow money, the bank have got sets of what they call it, all the banks, right? All the banks have got sets of algorithm and stuff, and determine, like, for example, you put in your income, etc., and bam, on the other side is basically how much you can borrow.
Yep.
Right? So it's a very logical market. You know what I mean? You can't just come and the days of low doc loans back in the day, 10 years, 15 years ago, that's all gone. Yep. These days, you have to have genuine income. You have to have proof, right? The bankers also look at how you're generating it. Is it stable, etc. So it's a very logical market. Basically, affordability is really tied to your income, and if you can't afford it, you can't afford it, right? There's very little ways around it. Whereas the share market is like, if you look at Amazon, Tesla, look at the PE ratio, look at how much profit they're making. It's crazy, the share price, right? It just doesn't make sense. So it's like Elon Musk can come up with a dream, a Cinderella story, and all of a sudden investors are like, oh, I like that story. Oh, he's going to take over. Great, buy that share. Compared to the share market, the property market is very logical. It's all tied into affordability, right? Responsible Lending Act. Make sure the banks follow that. Whereas the share market, obviously, I'm not a share market expert, right? And where share market, it's pretty much backed by people's confidence or level of speculation and all that. So if you're looking at bubble, probably the Bitcoin and definitely
I want to ask you about that actually. Yeah. Do you think Bitcoin's a big bubble, or what do you think about Bitcoin? Is it a bubble?
Again, look, I'm not an expert in Bitcoin. I don't hold any Bitcoins. I'm not a fan of Bitcoin. I prefer something brick and mortar. You can touch, feel,
gold,
and also produce income every day, right? So if you're a fan of Robert Kiyosaki, you know that the definition of asset has to be something that produces income.
I've recently been reading a lot of Robert Kiyosaki, his Rich Dad Poor Dad, the cash flow quadrant, great book, and obviously his podcast as well. He's absolute financial genius, really. I wanted to ask you, moving into more investing into real estate for beginners. I'll give you an open question, I guess. If you want to get into real estate investing, what would you recommend? How do you get started?
Well, I mean, obviously the bank. Well, you got to investing in property. You basically have to borrow money, right? Either through a bank or non-bank, etc. Play the leverage game. And two factors. Obviously, you have to have a decent income, stable income. And then the second one is obviously you gotta have the deposit, right? So for beginning investors, generally it's the deposit that's an issue. And there's not many ways you can get around that. One is obviously you save, right? Yep. Saving is important. And the other one is that hey, you got your family be able to help. If some people like their parents might have a property, might have got equity in their property, or they might be able to, some parents gift the deposit to the children to help them, with the first step. Some lend them the deposit, that kind of stuff. So really, yeah, there are not many options out there, really. And then hopefully for those who are able to, got the deposit and got the bank pre-approval to borrow the money to buy the property, then my advice to people who are buying their first homes, or especially, is that you got to look at that your first home is not going to be your last. Right, Kiwis generally change their homes every 7 years. These days, probably even shorter, right?
Yep.
So don't expect to buy. I'm in Auckland, right? Don't expect to buy a property in Parnell or Remuera, right?
Yeah.
You got to start from somewhere. So my biggest advice for beginning investors or first home buyers is that definitely you focus more on the lower end of the market, cheaper properties. Buy with the intention it's going to be a rental property, investment property. What that means is that you want to buy cheaper properties that has got a higher rental return, right? So that later on, if you upgrade your home, etc., the deal is going to make more sense, right? If you need to rent it out, then it's still going to cover itself, hopefully, pays for the mortgage and all that stuff. And generally, my experience has been that because, like I said, property is really logical, tied to affordability. So the lower end of the market, in my experience in the last 10 years, has tend to go up in percentage-wise faster than the high end of the market, just because the cheaper end of the market, everybody can afford it, right? You got more buyers able to buy it. If it's a $3 million property in Herne Bay, how many people can afford that?
Yeah.
Especially you need to borrow, say, $2.5 million, right? I can't even afford that with my stuff. Because there's no income attached to it, right? When you're buying a home. So definitely, if you are starting out, buy a sensible property. Don't stretch yourself too much, right? And at the same time, hey, if you got a lot of bedrooms, get flatmates to help out, etc. And that's really the Kiwi way. I didn't invent this. It's a trial and trusted method. Been done for the last decades.
Yeah.
And the same thing for property investors, first time or whether you're experienced investor, always focus on income, because income pays for the mortgage, right? Pays for the expenses, and also from a risk mitigation as well. In case you lose your job or whatever, or your business or whatever, the property itself still looks after it, right? The income from the rent still pays for everything. So that's what you want. You don't want to be in a situation where you're relying on, you got a negative cash flow property, you're topping up the mortgage yourself. Principal amount is okay, but, you don't want to top up the interest and all that stuff as well, That's kind of mitigating the risk. Yeah. Especially in the COVID environment, where a lot of businesses are laying off people. You never know how. It depends on people's profession. Some jobs are safer than others, but there's no such thing as guaranteed job.
Yeah,
right? Or business for the same matter. Yeah,
sure.
So you got to ensure that the property itself pays for itself, ideally, as a rental, and then that will allow you to borrow more money in the future as well.
Yeah, and in terms of starting out, are you looking for both capital gains and also weekly income from rent, or are you just focused on one when getting started out? What are New Zealand properties normally like? Can you get both?
Yeah, so you definitely can get both. Like I talk about, countries are printing money left, right, and center. Yep. So the currency is devaluing all the time.
Yep.
And houses are valued by currency, right? So even if your house stays in the same shape for 10 years, it's really the measurement of the value, real intrinsic value, that's changing with the currency. That's why, the inflation happens. So capital gain is going to come regardless, right? Just because money devalues. And also my recommendation has always been that people should invest in a town or a city with population is at least more than 100,000. Right, so that and also very important is population growth, because supply and demand. So if the town or city like Auckland or Hamilton, Christchurch, etc., is all growing, that means more demand for housing, and that's definitely where the capital gain is. The cash flow component is that if you want to grow your portfolio, you need equity, basically capital gains and cash flow, right, to be able to borrow more money. So that's why in a big city or big town, 100K population or more, if you focus on the cash flow type of properties, in the long run, you can borrow more money. That means you can buy more properties, and then obviously the longer you hold them, the more capital gain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm definitely more focused on the cash flow side, just because the capital gain will just come.
Fantastic. Now, you've obviously got a huge amount of economic knowledge, financial knowledge, real estate, investing, property knowledge. How did you acquire all this knowledge? Is it through experience, some sort of education? How did you acquire this?
Yeah, all combination. I think back in 2008. At the time, probably even 2006, I started with Rich Dad Poor Dad, the book.
Yep.
And that really kind of showed me the light at the end of the tunnel, right? It was like, once I read that, I was like so pumped up. It was like, okay, that was my dream to play World of Warcraft all day. And then subsequently on the back of the book, they also wrote with Kiyosaki recommended a lot of other books, Cash Flow Quadrant, Real Estate by Dolph DeRoos, and then obviously I went on Trade Me, look at books available on real estate. Andrew King, for example, these days you got Matthew Gilligan, you got Matthew Gilligan, you got the other guy who was president of APIA, Auckland Property Investor Association, David Whitburn. There are a lot of books, right, on the market about property. So I guess, I really recommend people to read them. Get as much basic knowledge as they can. And then also at the time there was back 20 years ago there was the Rich Mastery. So I got a friend who had DVDs, and then I would just watch them back then. It's a little bit outdated now with accounting rules and lending. But you got to understand how to do the no money down strategy. Basically, you want to buy something with a deposit, and you want to buy cheap. You want to buy create equity, basically. Some basic renovations and increase the value. And then you can go to the bank, get a valuation, top up the mortgage, get your deposit back, and then you put your deposit into the next property, right? No money down strategy. So you got to learn all that. You got to learn all the steps in between to make it happen, right? So that's really the biggest thing for me was really the knowledge I gained. And then obviously subsequently, I joined Ron Hoifeng's coaching back in 2010. And then that's where the practical knowledge came in, is that I saw other students of his, buying good deals, and on paper, in terms of no money down strategy, it all works out. It's like, oh, right. Why reinvent the wheel? I just buy the same ones. For similar properties, So really, having the knowledge, the basic knowledge and education, and obviously take action, right? And then having a mentor or a property coach on your side, that's really, really gonna turbocharge your investment journey. Yeah.
Fantastic. And you said at the start of the podcast you have your own sort of side hustle, your own coaching business. What do you do there, and how does it work? I saw on your YouTube channel that you have a wee series of your students buying their properties.
Yeah, I mean, for people interested, I obviously teach basically just replicate what my coach taught me, and then obviously adapting to the current market, and pretty much I do that through online courses and coaching as well, and pretty much pass on my knowledge, and also the more of the strategies that are tailored to the current market, and then pass it on to my students and help them to buy the best property according to their personal circumstances. I think it's really important because there's no one fits all approach, because I've got students around the country. So basically, I tell them, I basically help them to buy the best property kind of based on their situation. Based on where they're living, where the market, that kind of specific market. And then I look at each specific market as like, okay, this is the type of property you should be buying in this market. And then just see how they go. And if they can't find the right property in that market, okay, then they can look elsewhere. But generally the local market, the majority of them, they all live in the main cities anyway. So there's always good properties in that market.
Fantastic. No, that's awesome. Gary, I really appreciate your time and all the knowledge you've brought today. Is there anything else you want to touch on that's on your mind that you've been thinking about in terms of the financial industry, banking, real estate, anything that people should be knowing about going into 2021?
2021, there won't be too many market changes, I don't think. I mean, there's always going to be tendency, law changes and whatnot. That's all right, you know. But I guess the biggest thing for people watching this video, etc., is that no matter where you are in the stage of your life, you know, you got to also understand. Before I finish, the biggest thing, what we're going to see in 2021 onwards, we're going to have a new class of investors coming into the market, which are actually the baby boomers, the people who have retired, right?
Yep.
Because you got to look at the term deposit rates. Majority of baby boomers, they have sold up, you know, whether it's in shares or property. A lot of them are sold up. They live in a retirement home or they downsize their home, live by the beach, and they basically park their cash in the bank and then collect interest, and they live off the interest and super, right? But New Zealand super is like $500, $600 a fortnight. That's not enough.
Yep.
You know, so what's happening right now is a lot of people in retirement homes, etc. They're looking at their bank account. It's not growing, right? You know, they're not collecting enough interest from the term deposits, and then there's tax associated with that. And basically, they're all getting their cash out. And basically, the people can afford it. They'll become investors again. So you're actually seeing a lot of first-time investors, retirees, buying with cash. Right. Obviously, the ones who can't afford that, they will probably park in a managed fund somewhere to get a decent return. So you got a new class of investors competing in this market.
Yep.
And this is going to be an ongoing trend for the next 10, 20 years.
Yep.
Is that the people can't just park their money in the bank anymore. They have to actively invest their money somewhere. And definitely property is the way to go. Obviously, that's a majority of people will invest in safe brick and mortar, right? In Australasia, pretty much anywhere in the world, Western world. And then people who can't, with smaller sums, will invest in the share market, basically. So really, for the listeners, or if you're watching this, you know, YouTube, whatnot, you really need to, get your act together. You got to start investing. Doesn't really matter what stage of life you are. You need to invest. And the thing is, you got to really understand the market waits for no one, right? It's like going surfing. The tide waits for no one, right? And you got to really start. It's like an elevator that's just keep going up and up and up. So if you are not on top of the elevator, if you don't have the property on the ladder, then the market just keep going up, and then you'll be left behind. Really. Especially the amount of money printing and the speed of money devaluing, really the property prices keep going up faster than the increase in wages. And as years go by, etc., it's going to get harder and harder and harder as prices go up. So, you know, for the people who can buy now, you really are in a really privileged position. And so, yeah, really need to start investing. If you're already invested today, you know, don't stop. Keep buying, because you don't want to look back 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's like, damn, I wish I've, you know, listened to Gary and Tom and buy more properties.
No, that's awesome. Really appreciate it, Gary. Thank you.
That's right, mate.
Thank you for coming on the Tom Talks show, guys. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and this is also going to be on Gary's YouTube channel as well, I think. So head on over there to Gary Lin on YouTube. Right. Fantastic. Gary, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, just Google me. Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Cheers, mate.